And before we get started, I want to take a minute or two to just go over some housekeeping items. Okay, so all participants, as you entered, you're going to be muting unless you're presenting. And we'll be encouraging anyone who's not part of the panel to use the chat to make any comments or ask any questions that you have during the press conference. And I want you to know that if we have any technical difficulties anytime during the event, we may need to put the event on pause for a short time. And if we find that those technical issues can't be worked out and we have to end the press conference, you'll receive a follow-up email with any relevant information. Okay, or any details, any next steps, all of that you will receive. So great. So let's get started. As I said, I'm Carol Austin, and I'm the Executive Director First Up in Philadelphia. And First Up, we're one of the principal partners of the Start Strong Pennsylvania campaign. Start Strong itself was launched in 2019 with a mission to support healthy child development, working families, support the economy. You know, we do this by advocating for increased access and increased affordability of high quality programs. And you can learn more about the campaign, and you can sign on, as a matter of fact, to join our advocacy efforts by going to our website at www.startstrongpa.org. And Diane will put that in the chat for you so that you can access the website. So I'd also like to recognize the following elected officials and their staff and thank them for joining us today to hear more about the American Rescue Funds and how we believe they can immediately be used to help childcare reopen in Pennsylvania. So we also recognize that though we had a number of representatives register for the event, recently there was a schedule change, and there was an in-session date added in both the House and the Senate. So while many of them registered, we recognize that some may no longer be able to participate, but we do really appreciate their interest and attention to do so. So I want to recognize Representative DeLiso, Representative Hambridge, Representative O'Mara, Representative, we want to also recognize Joan Bradbury, who's the Republican Executive Director of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. We want to recognize Chris Wakely, the Democratic Executive Director of the House Education Committee, Camilla Horst, the Democratic Executive Director of the House Children and Youth Committee, Ann Bertolino, with the Republican House Appropriations Committee, Ron Burkhart with the Democratic House Appropriations Committee, Karine Christensen with Senator Colette's office, Lindsay Sansoni from Representative Emin Brown and Representative Piscotano's office, and Angie States from Representative DeLiso's office as well, and Tess Skekin from Senator Toomey's office, Kayla Primes from Congresswoman Houlihan's office, and many more. And if there's anyone that I have neglected, please forgive me. We want you to know that you're welcome, and we want to thank you for joining us today. In addition to that, I want to recognize Karen Grimm-Thomas from Oakdale, Tara Dwyer, who is the Director of Workforce Development there at Oakdale, and Erin James, who's the Press Secretary for the Department of Human Services. So following the panelist presentations, we're going to open for comments or questions from the media or from elected officials. So I'll now turn it over to Jen DeBell, who's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children. Jen?
Thank you, Carol, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. To ensure everyone has some background information on both the events and activities that have informed the report, we will share today an understanding of the funding support that child care programs have received during the pandemic to date. I'm going to quickly walk us through a one-page document on federal funding and give a brief summary of the virtual forums that we hosted. Thanks to Diane, she's going to be adding a link into the chat now to the document on the federal funding that I referenced. So as most of you know, the childcare sector was in crisis before the pandemic hit us, with eligible families unable to access childcare subsidy, poverty level wages for early childhood educators, and razor thin margins for providers. The childcare sector has been pushed to the brink of collapse because of the pandemic. Fortunately, the childcare industry has had some support through federal funding through the crisis. Pennsylvania received about $106 million dedicated to childcare through the CARES Act, And in addition, we want to applaud Governor Wolf and the General Assembly for appropriating an additional $116 million in discretionary CARES Act funds for Pennsylvania child care programs. Together, that money allotted to about $222 million, and the Wolf administration released it in 3 allotments from June to October 2020, based primarily on program size and type to help stabilize the child care sector. Then there was the Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021, which included $303 million directed at Pennsylvania for childcare. And the Wolf administration allocated these funds in the following way. First, they allocated about $212 million to childcare providers directly. This money was distributed in May and was again intended around childcare stabilization through the pandemic. $3 million of the funding was dedicated for a $600 pandemic relief award to the 5,000 staff that were waitlisted previously for this funding. Third, they allocated $87 million to continue the subsidy rate increase that the governor had recently announced into the next fiscal year. And finally, about $1 million was set aside for the early learning resource centers for an administrative rate increase. They've been really critical to ensuring the money gets out to providers and supporting providers through the pandemic. But even with these federal supports, childcare providers are still incurring additional pandemic-related costs while operating significantly under capacity in some cases still. And now more than ever, we understand the critical role that childcare plays, not just for children and families, but for our communities and the economy. It cannot be overstated that our economic recovery is not possible without childcare. The American Rescue Plan funds have the potential to provide both immediate necessary relief to stabilize childcare providers, but also strengthen and secure the industry for the long term. Nationally, the American Rescue Plan childcare funding includes $24 billion for childcare stabilization, $15 billion for the Child Care and Development Block Grant, known as CCDBG, and $3.55 billion in the child care entitlement to the states. Pennsylvania will receive $1.2 billion from this funding. In order to ensure the voice of childcare providers and families were heard as decisions are being made on how to spend these funds, Start Strong PA campaign partners had held 12 virtual forums inviting childcare providers and families to discuss what they see as critical to stabilizing, strengthening, and securing the childcare industry. In addition, we launched a statewide survey to expand our reach and the ability to gather feedback. Next, we're going to show a brief video compilation from the forums highlighting the thoughts and ideas of the providers and families who participated.
When a community is getting developed, there's strategic planning that should we bring a Starbucks here? But nobody talks about, should we bring a childcare post office? You have the grocery store. We should plan a childcare program there. And I think this moment really has to define that a community cannot exist if you don't have quality childcare programs.
We're not investing in our families and we're not investing in our programs, then there's a broken system, I think, from cradle to college. So we need our legislators to understand that this is a continuum system. We don't operate in silos, and we need to be funded fairly so that we are setting students up for success from birth to college.
If we want to scale up slots in infant toddler, it can't be tied to pre-K counts. It just can't. There's too many Start 3 and 4 facilities for a variety of reasons that don't participate in pre-K counts. And that's where all the slots under the pilot have gone.
So getting assistance with co-pays would actually help me out because that money can also help me like stabilize my finance, which ultimately I might have to pick and choose if I can work from work and meet the requirements that they're asking.
Like to see these funds be used to better understand the costs of delivering high quality care, that our subsidy reimbursement rates and any investments overall in the infrastructure of childcare need to reflect these costs.
We are essential. Without having us as providers, without childcare workers, without childcare staff, without childcare facilities, the infrastructure of every workforce is impacted.
But when parents do not have reliable, affordable, quality childcare, their work suffers, their productivity plummets, and they have difficulty advancing in their careers.
I spoke with a local superintendent recently who said their benefit line item is 33% of the wages. And childcare, you're looking at maybe 0 to 2% of
She had full Penn State benefits and retirement. Well, we don't do any of that. I mean, I feel so ashamed that I haven't been able to do that for my staff.
Those circumstances in which we would even want to work. Yet, we ask ECE teachers to live in poverty, which is a form of trauma, and serve children who also have, many of whom have been traumatized.
Have the same degree that teachers have in school districts, but have nowhere close to the same compensation or comparable income that they receive.
You know, the focus here really needs to be on our staff and compensating our staff fairly for the jobs that they do. That is the most important thing when we are looking at the quality of our child care program.
Children who are diagnosed with mental health issues and need these kind of wraparound services, that there be some kind of support from the state to support lower ratios so that they can engage in those social activities and get the high quality education without the child care's funding the services.
Our number one struggle right now is recruiting and retaining high quality staff. We have an empty classroom right now, and we have a big fat waiting list.
So those teachers feel abandoned. They don't feel supported in their classrooms.
We're teachers, we care for them, we educate, we individualize, we help students to make connections, and those connections last a lifetime. So I like to say we're building brains.
There we go. So thank you, Jen. And thank you for everybody who participated in our forums. There were amazing providers and parents featured in this video. My name is Diane Barber. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Child Care Association. It's now my pleasure to introduce the first of our two speakers who will not only share their personal stories, but give you a sense of what we heard across the state. Our first speaker is Stephanie Tapp. We are extremely fortunate to have Stephanie able to share her story with us by video this morning. Stephanie wanted to be with us in person, but she has an extremely busy life with 7 children and 3 jobs. 4 of her children are currently enrolled in childcare at Heritage for Kids Learning Center, a Star 4 NACE accredited program in Allegheny County. Let's hear what Stephanie has to share about her challenges with and hopes for Pennsylvania's childcare system.
I currently receive the CCW funding, and I have 4 out of my 7 children enrolled in childcare. I am a full-time working mom, and I have 3 jobs, and I need to have childcare available to ensure I can still work and support my family. The last time I spoke with you all, not all my children were enrolled in childcare at the time because of the space and the staffing issues at that facility, and that still hasn't changed. Actually, the issues have gotten worse. So I received a letter that my funding I lost the funding due to me not being able to utilize it. So I didn't want to find another child care facility because there aren't too many good quality child care facilities in my area. So now I'm kind of stuck on how I'm going to maneuver forward, being that I still have to work. Then the copay actually increased. So now I'm in a situation where, okay, paying this expensive childcare copay so they could go to daycare so I could work, or picking and choosing other bills I have to put off to make sure I can pay for that so I can still work and provide. So it's a lot of chaos and decision making that's going on. I also have to travel quite a distance from where I live to get to that daycare facility, because in my area that's a little closer, there isn't any childcare, or what used to be doesn't exist because of the pandemic. There's not being space, there's not enough funding, and there's just no good quality care providers in the area. So it's definitely important to me that my children go somewhere where I can feel comfortable when I'm not around. I feel like this funding can be used to support the child care providers, as well as making sure that the teachers can get paid, because with that brings more teachers, which would bring more space in the daycare facility so that more parents can get to work. And I feel like the ARP funding can also provide any resources or whatever is needed for the child care facility to become that 4-star facility and provide that good quality care. And this can also help if the copays was covered for like the rest of the year. Imagine not having to worry about paying that copay, and then you can focus on keeping up with your bills, your rent, your mortgage, and still being able to provide, and that's covered for at least the rest of this year while we recover from the pandemic. So I think that would be an excellent way to eliminate stress and to kind of make it easy for parents to like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about a copay. I can enroll them. They can go to daycare. It's a good daycare facility. There's funding circulating around. Like, I think that's a good atmosphere and would improve the workforce. And being that I'm a mom, a busy one, an African-American mom at that, there's not too many jobs I can apply to where I'm making what I'm making now to even get by or provide. So it's important for me to keep my childcare, have them in a location that I feel is safe, and with the appropriate amount of teachers in space so that everybody is learning and everybody's not like shoved in this one space, or because there's not enough, they can't open up extra rooms for the kids to just be free and learn on their level or in their age group. So with that being said, I'm hoping and looking forward to see those positive changes with providing more funding for the providers to open up better quality and good quality facilities, the funding to go to the teachers as well so they can make sure they're paid and taking care of their family while helping other families in the community. And then I'm hoping that we can get the co-pays covered so that's one less bill or burden that the parents have to worry about while we're trying to get back on our feet and recover from the pandemic.
Wow, Stephanie. We certainly thank Stephanie for sharing her story. What she shared was echoed by so many in the virtual forums last month. Our next speaker is Leslie Spina. Leslie is the founder and executive director of Kinder Academy in Philadelphia. Her founding mission has been to deliver high quality early childhood education to the diverse neighborhoods and families of Philadelphia. Leslie and her Kinder Academy team have served thousands of families in Northeast Philadelphia, and Leslie employs over 100 teachers and staff. Leslie, it's good to see you, and thank you for being with us here today.
It's only a year and a half later and I still can't forget to unmute. So it's that hot mic thing, it's a problem. So thank you for having me here. I have been in this field for 26 years now, and this is my calling for sure. This is not where I started life. I started in a very different place. As an accountant working at General Electric, going to do all of these great things and make all of this money and be this thing, this power woman. And It was the most miserable time of my life, and I fell here by accident. And this is where I'm supposed to be. So I have the great joy of loving what I do every day. You know, when we were in the pandemic and I was here by myself, one of the staff came one day and I heard a kid in the hallway. I'm like, there's a kid here, you know, because I had spent weeks in this building empty with no children here. Because if you could see my desk, you'd be shocked, because it's loaded with paperwork. I don't come here for the paperwork. I come here for the work that we do with children and families, but also I'm hugely dedicated to the work that we do with staff. The staff here, mostly women, 99% of my staff is women. They come here and we find pathways for them to have careers, not jobs. The work that's here has the potential to be a real career with benefits and with a wage where they don't qualify for food stamps and WIC, and a pathway to supporting a family so that we allow generations to continue to move on that strong path. So that is embedded in all of the work that we do. It's not just taking care of the children. It's this bigger calling to this work. And I am not the only one that looks at this work this way. And again, it's a privilege to be able to be there. And I'm not in savior mode. That's not where we are. It's about empowerment, which is an entirely different thing, because the women who are here, they save themselves and their children. And it's hard work to get there. And so I'm telling you all these things, which seem so different from what this conversation is today, because it is at the root of this conversation. We are here doing Eve's work. We are making women strong and children strong and families strong. We are providing opportunities. We are doing all these things because it's part of our civic responsibility. It's part of who we are in this community. It lends itself to being more socially just, more diverse, more open to all of the things that are in our community. What a privilege it is for me to be here as a young, middle-aged, something. If I live to 150, maybe I'm middle-aged, I don't know, white woman in this role, that I get to live my career as in a place where I just love the work that I do, and I get to be with the most amazing women and some really amazing men as well. But although those are all the reasons to be here, my fear is that I have only this much time left, because I can't sustain this work with the plan that we're on now. I'm currently working on my doctorate at University of Pennsylvania, and every so often we do some things with the Wharton kids, right? Like, I'm not one of the kids anymore, but and if I brought this business plan to them and said, here, tell me what to do, they would say, okay, we're gonna stop, full hard stop doing this. Let's find you a real job, right? Because the potential for this is not to stay open and to grow and to do the things that we're doing. The potential is that we run out what little bit of savings that we have for the future, what little is left, and that we can't keep the doors open. Or that we have to decide that we no longer are interested in having degree teachers who have a salary where they can feed their children. Or we have to decide that we no longer invest in having playgrounds where children are safe, or having classrooms where they have learning materials. Because all of those things cost money, and they don't cost a little bit of money, they cost a lot of money. And they're worth the investment. And in Philadelphia, in the fifth largest city in this country, but one of the poorest urban areas in the country, my children here deserve everything that all other children deserve, right? Nobody can argue that. But what people do argue is what we pay to get that and how we get there. That path costs something, but the other path costs something more. When we take the other path and we don't invest, we are deciding to continue the cycle of poverty, and we are deciding that later on we'll pay the price for that with prisons, with with crime, with low education and graduation rates, with high teen pregnancy rates, with all of these things that continue to lead to more poverty. It's virtually no different than redlining and keeping people in their place that way, to not invest in this industry so that we help children and families and women get to a place where they can be assured of the success that they hope to achieve. So that's a long way to me saying what I want, and what all of us want is we want the subsidy system to fully reimburse what the cost of care is. We want to go back to pre-pandemic rates where we knew where we were enrolled and be compensated at that level, because our costs have not gone down because the number of children are here has gone down, because people are afraid to come out of their house. People are afraid in these very poor areas because they are most likely to die from COVID because they don't have the infrastructure to save themselves, because we've kept them poor. It's our opportunity now to fix that. We have to ensure that our places are safe, and we're doing that by following all the rules from the health department. It costs a lot of money. We have cohorts, we don't mix staff. I have to pay people full-time hours. They can't, when you are making $10 or $12 an hour, you cannot work only 30 hours instead of 40. That means you can't buy food. We're not talking about, oh, I won't be able to go buy my Porsche this year. We're talking about, I won't be able to provide food by having a 25% cut in my hours, or even a 15% cut in my hours. We need these things, and we need them now. And every month I'm losing about $70,000 a month of what I should be reimbursed because of this change in the subsidy guidelines. Now, $70,000 is a lot of money, right? Like, that's a lot of money for a year. We don't have margins that allow that. So the money that we have been really careful with to make sure that when we have a roof repair or when we have an emergency, that money that we've had put aside and we've been so careful with, that money's gone. We are at the end of this. We are living hand to mouth now to make sure that we can get to the next month. We're in a place where we did a hiring freeze, the first, or a rate increase freeze. The first time in 26 years, we didn't give raises to our staff. We did not give raises to the lowest income earners. I can't afford to give raises. And I know that that means we'll lose some people, and we're begging people to stay. You can change that by fixing what has happened with the subsidy system and how childcare is reimbursed. We are a part of the infant toddler contracted slots program. We know that it's new and they're working out some of the bugs, and it's been a little bit difficult, but I'm thrilled that in Pennsylvania, we are going to make sure that infants and toddlers are not forgotten. We have displaced so many of those slots by putting in preschool slots because we've been focused solely on this preschool experience, but children don't start learning the day they walk through kindergarten or the day they walk through preschool. They start learning before they're even born. So our commitment to children begins when parents are here and they're getting ready for their new child to start. And it begins the minute that that child's in our care and learning from us. They spend more hours with us from 0 to 5 than they do in the whole K-12 system. More hours with us. There's more to be learned in that time. The brain research that is really coming forward now says that all of these neurons are firing and they're going crazy, and more is being learned now than ever at this time with us. So we need to fund more slots for that. We need 3,000 more slots, and we need to make it so that families can actually get in those slots. Stop policing the poor and give them opportunities to access the resources that they need so that they can get on a different path. We need to do these things. It's not that it would be nice or it would be fun, or, you know, I'm not asking for things that aren't integral to what the children and family needs. I'm not asking for that. I am asking, I'm demanding, I'm telling you, for the high quality centers to stay in business, we need these things. You must fully fund the subsidy programs. We need lots of things. We need the Keystone Stars program to give us bonuses back. And we need to have a reimbursement rate that actually looks something like what we pay out in costs. The reimbursement rate is based on something from 12 years ago, and it wasn't enough then, and it's certainly not enough now. And like I said, if the Wharton kids were sitting here, they'd be saying, yeah, you tell them this is crazy, get out of there, right? And all of the people at the top, all the stakeholders would hope to have the Wharton kids do a project for them, and they would do what those kids said. So if you can't listen to me, I'll get them for you. But I'm telling you, 26 years here, I want to stay here. I want to keep doing this work. We do amazing things, not just me, all of my peers at this level. We do this work day in and day out with our full commitment to this work. And we're willing to do whatever we need to do to help maintain these high quality standards that Pennsylvania has really sought for the last 18 years. Please do not let it backslide. Childcare will not go away. People will always come forth. There will always be childcare, but the high quality childcare cannot continue this way.
Leslie, thank you. I know, big intake of breath. Just and because you were speaking, our chat box blew up, and your story resonated through the audience that is with us today. We have heard concerns expressed by both Stephanie and Leslie. And we've heard those same messages in the 12 forums that we conducted across the state and in the survey responses. I will now turn it over to Cara Simonella, who is the Executive Director of Trying Together in Southwest Pennsylvania, to discuss the recommendations of the group and your recommendations if you participated in the forums. Cara?
Thanks, Diane, and thank you to both Stephanie and Leslie. These were incredible examples illustrating why it's so important for Pennsylvania to have the right priorities when spending American Rescue Plan funding. Over the past month and a half, Start Strong Pennsylvania partners have listened and learned exactly what those priorities should be, using feedback gathered from field forums and surveys with over 1,000 individuals contributing. I'm pleased to share our recommendations. The initial recommendations we are presenting today are intended to stabilize the industry. These first 5 policy recommendations can be passed through budget enactment in the fiscal code before the end of this month, June 2021, when the state budget will be finalized. These recommendations could be achieved expeditiously with support from the General Assembly and Governor Wolf, and would provide much needed immediate relief for families and childcare providers. We believe they should be put forth first, and then to ensure the remaining recommendations are considered, we have included a 6th immediate recommendation for the formation of a 5-party work group that would convene within 60 days. My colleague Kevin, I believe, is going to pull up the set of recommendations. Thanks, Kevin. The following policy recommendations would require ARP funds to be used immediately through budget enactment. So the first, provide payments to childcare providers serving families receiving subsidy to be used exclusively for recruitment of new staff and retention of existing staff. Payments would be calibrated based on program type and capacity of the childcare program. This would address the current challenge of hiring and retaining staff, allowing more children to be served. And we heard about those wait lists from some of our earlier speakers. Number 2, eliminate copays for families receiving subsidies. Use ARP funds to reimburse childcare providers for loss of copays. This would relieve families of a financial burden as they return to work post-pandemic and ensure that providers receive stable payment. Number 3, advertise the child care subsidy program, focusing on targeted geographic areas to assist more families in getting back to work. Designate ARP funds to fund all child care subsidy slots so that no family has to wait to receive services. Number 4, pay subsidized child care providers based on enrollment and not attendance beginning July 1st of 2021 through 2024, consistent with proposed child care subsidy regulations. Then retroactively pay subsidized child care providers who have suffered losses due to under-enrollment from September 1st of 2020 through June 30 of this year, 2021. Base payment on pre-pandemic enrollment and account for the difference between those losses and any pandemic payments made through federal stimulus funds. This would provide financial stability for child care providers while enrollment increases as parents return to work. And then number 5, fund an additional 3,000 high-quality contracted infant toddler slots to help more families get back to work. And lastly, number 6, create a 5-party work group that would convene within 60 days of signing of the fiscal code, which would include the majority and minority appropriations committee chairs in the House and Senate, and a representative of the governor's executive office. This working group will consider the remainder of the Start Strong PA field forum and survey recommendations as they determine how the remainder of the funds would be spent. So this is our ask. We are urging state lawmakers to reach consensus on childcare investments that enable parents to get back to work and children to benefit from the high quality care we know prepares them for school and a lifetime of success. The childcare sector is reeling and needs an immediate infusion of resources to reopen and rebound. Programs need help recruiting and retaining staff so that working families can enroll their children. These specific recommendations address the childcare crisis by helping families afford and access care, helping providers stabilize their income, helping providers strengthen their program by filling open staffing positions and keeping them from leaving the field. The link to these immediate recommendations and the full report will be placed in the chat. I think Diane's going to drop that in there for us. I will now open for questions from the media, legislators, or legislative staff, and ask that my campaign partners join in providing any answers to any of the questions that folks have. Additionally, if there's any media that has joined us today and wants someone to contact you following this event, please do put your name and media outlet and email in the chat box and we'll respond to you after the event. So in closing, I want to reemphasize, so let me go to questions first before I close.
So we've actually had a couple of questions about whether the PowerPoint is going to be available, and yes, it will be. We will be posting that and a recording of this session on the Start Strong PA website.
Thanks, Diane.
Yep.
I see.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask. We had some. Carol asked, said thank you, and then she also wanted to know: do we know when? Any idea when the funds will begin flowing?
So I can take that one. So the first part of the process is that the General Assembly and the governor, as part of the budget process, will have to actually put federal money that we've received into legislative bill format and allocate the funding out. So once that is done and the money is actually appropriated and able to spend, then we're going to have to see if there is agreement reached on, what we're proposing or other ideas that are out there. And then it's going to be up to the Department of Human Services and the administration to get the money out to providers or, to address the other recommendations that we've talked about. So we can't give an exact time frame, but a lot of this is tied to the state budget, which has to be passed by June 30th.
Thank you. We did have a question from Susan, who said, how are we supporting families who do not make the financial cutoff for subsidized childcare?
So I think, this is something we did hear in a lot of the 12 forums. We recognize it is an issue. The concern is the bulk of these funds are considered one-time funding. So while we're certainly looking at longer term, how we can strengthen the system, not just stabilize, we also have to recognize that until we win permanent childcare funds, we have to be careful of what we're putting forward, that it's not something we would have to take away when the funding goes away. So that's why we didn't initially recommend that as a solution at this time. I think that's a discussion that we need to have down the road as we move forward. And of course, our subsidy program is more generous than some other states. It goes up to 200% of the poverty level. You can stay in up to 235. We certainly recognize there's families that are above that in the middle class that are struggling. We hope that the federal expansion of things like the child care tax credit could be helpful to those families as well.
And I think we've already answered this. In terms of the campaign's proposals, the question was, when do we expect an answer?
Well, over the next few weeks, the budget will be negotiated. We will be working closely with our colleagues in the General Assembly and the administration and doing our best to make the case for our recommendations. So we're hoping by June 30th, we can answer that question definitively.
I
don't see any more questions. Do you?
There is a new one. Okay, this is more of a comment. So our program is subsidizing care for families who cannot afford our private fees, 99%, yet don't qualify for CCW subsidies, and this is not sustainable.
Yeah. We know it's very real that childcare is unaffordable.
We also had a question, what will happen if the minimum wage increases?
So there are several proposals, both at the state and federal level, to increase the minimum wage. At the federal level, President Biden has put forward a proposal that would increase the wage, but at the same time would increase funding to programs, at least subsidized programs, to help them pay for the cost of quality, which you all know as providers, your biggest cost are your staff. So it would help address that. Governor Wolf's proposal to increase the minimum wage did set aside some funds for subsidized providers as well, to help reach the $12 an hour, which he's proposed. So, as advocates, we are always looking to make sure that when wage proposals are put forward, that there's also the funds there to support at least our subsidized providers in being able to pay their staff at the appropriate wage.
So Jen, we had a question in the chat from Sharon. I'm just going to paraphrase it a little bit, Sharon. So in our recommendations, did things come out of the forums that talk to the needs of families that are not eligible for childcare works, and how we could support families but also providers?
So, Kara, are you going to jump in? Or
I was just trying to think. So first, because I'm reading Sharon's question, I do want to clarify that the 5 recommendations that I outlined came directly from the forums and the surveys. They were really the top recommendations that surfaced. So these were not our recommendations. These are what came from the families and providers that responded to the forums and to the surveys. But I hear you, Sharon. I think we've heard from a few others already that childcare is unaffordable for families that lie just outside of eligibility for CCW. We also believe that is an issue, and that's an issue that needs to be addressed. I think Jen tried to identify a couple other opportunities at the federal level to help meet the needs of families. So, you know, the sixth recommendation was about taking the rest of those recommendations that surfaced, and there was many in the survey, although we raised the first five, the greatest sort of responses or the greatest issues that folks illustrated or highlighted. There were many others, and those are the ones that we are suggesting in that sixth recommendation, where there's that work group that the five-party work group really comes together and says, how do we address these other issues? And so it would be through that work group that would be discussed. And feel free to add on, Diane or Jen and Carol, if I missed anything.
And I think also we're not, oh, sorry, Diane.
No, go ahead.
We also are, this is not the end of input.
Yeah.
Okay. We already discussed as well that because some of the feedback that we got, that's also in the spreadsheet, and we'll share that publicly with everyone so that you can see the comments that were made in the recommendations. It warrants some more conversation for clarity as well. So there'll be other opportunities that we're creating to provide more clarity and to, expound on some of these recommendations that I think will speak, Sharon, to what you're talking about with regard to, because pretty much every program, Star 4 program takes private pay parents as well. So, that is a concern all the way across the board.
Yeah, I was just going to say that please do click through to the report, because we've captured everything from the forums. And it is, when we talk about, I think the number of indiscreet suggestions was 35. So when we talk about trying to raise up the top 5, and then have partnering with the General Assembly or to help us identify out of the remaining 30, how we can address those. There are some additional questions about, in the question box, there was a question that from Heather saying, we always hear about a livable wage or an appropriate wage. What is the wage range that is always referred to?
So what you typically hear, a lot of the proposals are calling for $15 an hour minimum wage at the federal level, $12 going up to $15 at the state level as a minimum. And then as a maximum, paying teachers that have similar degrees to our pre-K to 12 school district-based staff, the same compensation.
Yeah. I think some people refer to it as pay parity. You may have heard that before. Kara, did you want to say something or?
No, you got it.
I have multiple screens up, so I'm trying hard to see everything. So let me see what we have. There's a lot of stuff in here. I did just repost the link to the field forum piece in the chat box. Let's see. So we had
question about early learning providers reaching out to their state reps. Absolutely.
Thank you.
To encourage their support and recommendations. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. They need to hear from you. They need to hear from you in their neighborhood, in their district. That has way more power. And you can galvanize, if you can galvanize it, any other programs in your same district as well, that helps. And families and the whole works of it, yes.
Yep, and Tiffany's one of ours. I'm winking at her. Oh. I think we have some other things we could do, Tiffany, to sort of echo the recommendations. So I'll give you a call afterward.
There's a question on whether if you increase staff wages now to 12, whether that would jeopardize future funding for our center. I don't know how that would be the case. I don't imagine that would. Is there something that I'm not seeing? No, it shouldn't then. Yeah, people are nodding their heads. No.
Yeah. I see a question in here about the ERA. I can say that in tallying kind of the comments at the forums, this came up in every single forum and every single survey as a priority. And, you know, as Kara mentioned, one of our top 5 priorities is to make the payment to providers that would focus on staff retention and to hire new staff. So it's not specifically the ERA, at least to start. But when you look in the report, there is a recommendation to bring it back, and there were recommendations made to improve it. So this is not something we're letting go. We still are concerned that it was eliminated. Felt that the quicker payment regarding, you know, staff hiring, retention as a whole was something that was needed very quickly to stabilize the industry. But you'll see when you look at the report, ERAs are in there very prominently.
Oh, good point. So actually, Sean Toohey just brought this up, that when you're posting in the chat, some of your posts are only going to the panelists and not to the panelists and attendees. So your co-attendees can't see some of the questions that you're asking.
So what there would be to do is to, in that box under chat, just change from all panelists to everyone.
Yes.
So Leslie pointed out that today's conversation was just about the ARP funds, which have a sort of sunset date of when they have to be spent by. So that's why this particular conversation is focused on the ARP funding. We absolutely will continue to talk about and want to facilitate continued provider conversations, feedback loops for what we need to do to solve the long-term issues that our field is faced with, including workforce, which I know, at least here in Southwest Pennsylvania, seems to be the #1 issue. So again, this is just us trying to help provide some feedback to the state around the ARP funding, but the existing issues that have only been exacerbated during the pandemic are things that we still need to push for solutions on. So there will be continued conversations. We need your input. We need your voice, your advocacy. This certainly is not solving the challenges our field faces.
Sandra asked, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carol.
Go ahead, Diane.
I was gonna say, Sandra asked a question. Are there any considerations in place to differentiate the needs of rural communities compared to city centers? Rural pay rates for staff and tuition rates are much lower, but the need is still there.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's a few things that probably reflect in that. There is a recommendation around paying for moving away from the market rate and paying for the actual cost of care, which, while that's not focused on rural areas, would help everyone statewide if we're actually paying for what it costs you to provide the care. The other thing is you'll see there's a recommendation that deals with non-traditional hour care and potentially bringing back the old add-on rate for that. We know in a lot of rural areas, particularly family childcare has been a solution for addressing non-traditional hours, on the weekends and the evenings. So that was something that came up. Anything else on rural that I'm not remembering?
I think it became, this just as an aside, I've always looked at the subsidy rates. I mean, but I've never looked at them in a very discrete way. And one of the things when the rates were raised in March, I did an ELRC by ELRC look at rates, and the differences between regions, I guess now, were actually astonishing. And so I think we need to continue. This is just PACA talking, or Diane Barber talking even, that we need to continue to look at that because I think we are talking, because there we're talking about equity issues for real. So, but again, I think if we move from that market rate is what's driving what the subsidy rate appeared to be. So as Jen said, as we move from a market rate perspective to a cost of care perspective, we can then really dig into what does it cost for us to provide high quality child care, regardless of where our program and our families live. So let's see. Oh boy, you guys are so like, there's so many questions. Let me see. Is there any hope in getting the merit awards back for our teachers with degrees? So I think that's the ERA question. So it is one of the recommendations that came out of the forums. Now, hope, we can always have hope. We can always have hope. So, and we have $1.2 billion. I love to say that. I've never in my entire career been able to say $1.2 billion. But as Leslie pointed out, these are one-time only funds at this point. So we need to see, we look at these funds, this opportunity as transformational. What can we do today that will carry us through to the future? So anybody else see? Let's see. Okay, so Shelley brought up, you have mentioned increasing pay for employees, but providers who are home-based with no employees have the same issues. My fees are the same for private pay as it is for Child Care Works recipients because you cannot have different fees for private pay. I think oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, Diane, and as a home-based provider, she is still staff. So right. her wages need to go up. So whether you are a staff of 1 or you are a staff of 100, I think what we know to be true about the sector is that our folks are underpaid and the costs are there, whether you're home-based, whether you're center-based. And that we need enough funding to support not only children to thrive, but also the folks who care for children to thrive. And it doesn't matter what setting you reside in.
Leslie says, she said she's heard concerns about Phil Cerniti's report that was issued towards the beginning of the year. His research was very limited, only 10 participants. My concern is that it paints a picture of costs that are significantly lower than anything possible in the Southeast region and many other regions. Is anyone asking for an expansion of the research and the report? Go ahead, Jen.
So we have at least started conversations with Octel, as they were considering the new state plan that they have to submit to the federal government. We have asked them to start looking at moving to a cost of quality instead of market rates for setting the rates. And we've talked to some national experts. If we move in that direction, there's a lot more work going to have to happen than just that report. Much more extensive feedback from the field is going to be needed to get approval from the federal government, is our understanding. So we're actually going to hopefully do some learning about that this summer from some of the other states that are a little further along than we are. But I think that's a good point, that we need to make sure that as we're doing a study, it's representative of all providers across the state. We're such a diverse state.
Jen, can I jump in real quick? We have to remind people that the market rate surveys aren't helpful if we only fill out what subsidy pays us, because then it looks like we're getting paid what we're asking for. And I think that there's a big disconnect out in the field. So I know people will say to me, oh, I just put in my rates. I just put in my rates. And we want people to understand that getting paid at the minimum bar does not help you get to the next place. So I would love it. And I know First Up has done a ton of work in this region, helping people understand that, but I think it's been a little bit of a hard sell. And it reaches only a certain kind of provider, someone who's doing work with First Up. So I think that we would be doing something very helpful to the entire industry, including the family care, if we help people understand that they need to start telling people what they need to make. I don't need $8,440 per child. I need $14,000 per child. Thank you very much. That's what I need. So I don't feel like I should be thankful that I got the 8,000. I mean, I'm thankful that we have the slots and we're doing the work, but I would be more thankful if they fully funded that. And so I think that starts well before the legislators are saying this is how much we're going to put in there, that the people who are doing this work need to understand that they need to make more to keep things going. And those family care people as well should be getting reimbursed what it costs them to do this work from their home.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of questions in there about will there be funding for centers that are looking to improve their existing programs, looking to improve quality? And I think you'll see in the recommendations, yes, the broad recommendation document that's there as well. Any other questions to address?
There's a lot. And there's also some comments. So has there been Robin asked, has there been a recommendation for funding for new centers to be built? And I don't recall.
I believe through the forums and surveys, more focused on improvements in existing programs.
Yeah.
However, one of the federal bills that's been proposed that has not passed, the President's American Jobs Plan does include a potential investment for new facilities. But again, that has not gone through yet. That's something to negotiate, like it will be negotiated over the summer, potentially.
So Suzanne said in the summary, it is reporting that $212 million was for providers to be distributed in May of 2021. Is the last payment received that was supposed to be distributed in April count for the payment received May 1st, 2021? I guess we need to know if more funds are going directly to providers.
Yes, I think the April funds are the May funds, if that clarifies that. And then Sean pointed out that the federal guidance specifies that a large portion of the 1.2 billion that Diane mentioned goes directly to providers.
And then also one of Carrie asked, how do I get contracted infant and toddler slots? Well, that's our proposal. And the proposal that came out of the forum actually is not only about contracted slots, but the contracts were not limited to pre-K counts providers, that the contracts would be open to all high quality providers, including family homes, which were excluded because they don't have access to pre-K counts funds. So that it would be a much more open process than we currently have with the pilot dollars. Are there any other questions, or if there's something that we missed because all of a sudden they came in at like 17 at a time?
I think we've covered them.
Yeah.
So I think we just want to really emphasize that these recommendations for folks that are still in the call came from the child care field, from providers themselves, from working families. And I think we really want to emphasize that what matters to them should matter to us and to our elected leaders. So we really appreciate you coming on, you listening, to our speakers, giving thought to the recommendations that came from the field and from families, and forwarding your questions. I'm excited by the fact that we're not only talking about this infusion of dollars, this ARP funding, but that there is a lot of interest in continuing to talk about sort of long-term solutions to the challenges that the field is plagued with. And so we look forward to having those continued conversations and sort of echoing your passion and making sure you're heard. So thank you again for joining us today. Again, don't hesitate to check the Start Strong PA website for the full report. You can contact any of us on this forum if you have questions afterward. And again, thank you for joining us. We will see you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Thanks, Leslie.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Always, Leslie.
I always have a lot to say, sorry.